Fran Foster, a past master of Pawtucket Lodge. Welcome to our 14th show of What It Means to Be a Mason. Tonight we have as our guest Mr. Thomas Leavitt, the director of the Museum of our National Heritage in Lexington. Good evening, Tom. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
How did the National Museum come into being, and when did it start construction? And can you?
Well, the museum happened largely because early in the 1970s, George Newberry, who was then the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite in the Northern Jurisdiction, decided that the fraternity should do something for the bicentennial of the American Revolution that would have some kind of permanent presence. And I think without a whole lot of discussion, they quickly agreed that what they ought to do for the bicentennial was to build another American History Museum. They broke ground in 1971 and hired the director in 1974, and they opened the museum doors to the public on April 20th, 1975, and we've been open 360 days a year ever since.
Excellent. Now, you know, the museum is in Lexington. Why in Lexington? Is that has significance?
Well, there are a couple reasons. The most immediate is that a few years before they started the museum, the Scottish Rite had moved their national headquarters from downtown Boston to Merritt Road in Lexington, and they bought about 14 acres of land that had a large house and a carriage house, so that would serve as their corporate headquarters. So in 1970, when they decided to build a museum, they were there in Lexington. They were doing this project for the bicentennial. Lexington was the town where the first battle for the Revolution began, and lo and behold, fortuitously for them, it turned out that just adjacent to the property they'd purchased was another 7 acres that was right at the intersection of Merritt Road and Massachusetts Avenue, which is also known as Battle Road in Lexington.
Oh, yeah.
And so it just, all those things, I think, came together and just made it obvious to them that that's where the museum ought to be.
Sounds good. Now, you have some permanent displays there, or changing displays. What displays?
Well, we do now have 2 permanent exhibitions and 2 galleries that we use for temporary or rotating exhibitions. The 2 permanent exhibitions are related to our mission and to the fact that we're in Lexington. One, called Lexington Alarmed, is our attempt to tell people about the reasons why Lexington became the community where the first battle of the Revolution took place. So we talk about Lexington in 1775, the farming families who lived there, and of course the daylight skirmish on the Green on April 19th. In the second permanent exhibition, called Initiating America, we attempt to tell our visitors about the terribly significant role that fraternal societies have played in American life since 1730 or so. And because the Masonic fraternity was the earliest, and by all accounts, the most significant fraternity in this long list of fraternities and sororities that have been organized, that exhibition uses Masonic memorabilia as sort of a skeleton on which to hang the story. But we talk about other fraternities as well, the Odd Fellows and the Knights of Columbus, and some 500 others that have played a role in American history, modeling themselves in large part on the Masonic fraternity.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the other fraternities kind of take their model as from the Masonic fraternity in their forms and functions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You have a library there also, don't you? Which is, I believe, the most extensive library of Masonic information in the world.
Well, we think we can make that claim. We're a young library, and while our boundaries are national and even international in scope, we also respect the fact that there are in the fraternity, particularly in the older grand lodges, Pennsylvania and Massachusetts and New York, just to name three, there are also terrific libraries. And what we're attempting to do in order to make it a win-win situation for everyone is to build our own collection, but also to coordinate and cooperate with those older, terrific libraries in the Grand Lodges. And we talk to those folks all the time, so that my feeling is that we're complementing each other, and there's no competition for resources. But we hope over a period of time to make our library a center for the study of fraternal history, and particularly for Masonic history in America.
You mentioned the other Grand Lodges. A lot of people don't realize that there are 51 Grand Lodges in the United States, one for each state and the District of Columbia. And each Grand Lodge is autonomous unto itself. There is no national organization, or a controlling organization of Masonry.
That's one of the sort of surprising things about the fraternity, the degree to which 51 entities are really autonomous. But among them, they've managed over the years to collect some wonderful memorabilia, so that what many people don't realize that their libraries and museums contain good materials, which are, by and large, like ours, also open to the public. That's a fact that lots of people who aren't Masons don't realize.
And there are no secrets in Masonry. You can go to the library there and pick up any book that you want. That'll tell you all about Masonry, anything you ever wanted to know about it.
This is true. Most of the secrets, for better or worse, have been printed and distributed years and decades ago.
Now, you just recently had some new construction there. Can you tell us what that was?
When the museum was finished in 1974, one of its features was an open courtyard that was surrounded by 3 of the 4 galleries. And I guess the thought then was that this courtyard would be a kind of indoor-outdoor gathering place for special events and receptions and so forth. In the event, it turned out that that space was seriously underutilized. And so last year, when thanks to a generous bequest by Brother James Farr, who was among the founders of the museum and was a very successful lawyer in Boston, we were able to hire an architect and ask him to come up with a plan to convert that courtyard into usable space for us. And what we created is what is now called the James Farr Conference Center. It's a large, very attractive meeting room, as viewers will see in a few minutes, as well as additional display case for our collection and for collections that we anticipate coming to the museum in the near future.
And I've been there a couple times, and to an auditorium where there was a couple lectures at times.
The Stanley Maxwell Auditorium was part of the original package, and that's one of the features of the museum that I've been trying to expose to a larger audience since I got there 4 years ago, because it's a theater and an auditorium that really has no equals in the area, and we're able to do all sorts of musical programs and lectures and films and slide presentations and dance in that theater, which has a really professional stage and dressing rooms on both sides. So it's a really terrific asset for us.
So this theater and auditorium then isn't really restricted to Masonic events, is it?
Absolutely not. We do a number of Masonic events in the auditorium. We did 2 last month, and I think there are a couple more coming up next month. But most of the time, the auditorium is used for, it's used by the Lexington Sinfonietta. The Lexington Garden Club holds its monthly meetings there. We have a bluegrass series. We have a Celtic music series. We have a classical heritage series. So it has a pretty rich menu.
Very good. Well, you said you had a tape, so maybe we'll view the tape and see something of the museum. Then.
Terrific.
When the Museum of Our National Heritage was incorporated in 1971, its founder and first president, George Newberry, articulated an ambitious and unconventional vision. Newberry wanted the museum to do far more than educate visitors about our country's past. He wanted it to inspire them with our country's spirit and ideals. The museum opened its doors in 1975, and since then has operated free to the public through the generosity of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the northern jurisdiction. The Museum of Our National Heritage has brought Newberry's vision to life for thousands of visitors. It has inspired them with our dreams and diversions, our shining hours and disappointments, the glories of our natural resources, our rituals, and the everyday activities that are so revealing of who we are and who we aspire to be. The museum is located in historic Lexington, Massachusetts, where its wooded grounds, human scale, and easy accessibility make visitors immediately feel at home. On the inside, its design enables them to interact with exhibits, reflect on what they've seen and heard, and participate in history coming alive.
The plant itself is designed in such a way that we can do not only conventional exhibitions, but we can complement the exhibitions with music, with performances, with readings, with film inside the building. And we can fortunately use the grounds that surround the building to further complement the exhibition menu. The institution, in its inception, was more of an idea and an ideal than it was an institution. And the remarkable thing is that as the plant was put together and as the staff was assembled, and the founders realized the implications of what they were doing, that their enthusiasm for the project never wavered. That's meant that 25 years after the fact, that their baby has developed into a lively, mature adult.
The museum's permanent exhibits offer intriguing perspectives on the rebellious birth of our country and the role of fraternal and sororal organizations in the development of our society.
In accordance with our mission statement, we are committed to an exhibit on Lexington's role in the American Revolution because we are located here in historic Lexington and virtually right on Paul Revere's historic route, just before he got captured by the British.
Lexington Alarmed focuses on the everyday lives of colonists in the farming community of Lexington on the eve of the Revolution.
We are able to be more specific about the events that shaped their thinking and brought them to the point where they would dare raise a musket against the king's troops. Well, they didn't have television in the 18th century. We do have a current presentation of the event at Lexington, and we also have an 18th century version coming from London. So the visitor is able to make their choice as to whether they're they're in agreement with the rebels or whether they're going to remain loyal to the king.
Too heavy to bear. Good evening. I'm Percy Bishop, reporting from London.
The permanent exhibit, Initiating America, contains many items from the museum's collection of Freemasonry. When the museum opened, its collection of Masonic artifacts was quite modest. But through a quarter-century of gifts and acquisitions, that has dramatically changed.
So we have developed a world-class collection. It's probably the finest in the world now of fraternal material that has really gained a reputation for the institution. The organizations developed their own regalia, their own paraphernalia, their own rituals and ceremonies, and they tend to enrich our social history because of the reasons they were formed.
Every year, the museum also mounts a variety of temporary exhibits. They range from Masonic symbols to jigsaw puzzles, from Navajo weavings to roadside diners, from Paul Revere's Midnight Ride to Women of the Wild West shows.
We try to choose subjects for exhibition that have been part of a typical American family's life at some time in the past. What we're trying to do is to make history come alive and make it relevant to the visitor in a way that will make the experience memorable.
The museum's handsome building and grounds contribute greatly to the visitor's pleasure and ability to learn.
School groups come here, neighbors come in, families come, corporations hold functions here. It seems as though every weekend there are activities here, there are lectures, there are concerts, there are performances, and people are being brought in. So in many respects, both the administration of the museum and I as an architect working with the museum are simply trying to take advantage of what was done right in the first place and to build upon that.
The original facilities included the lobby, a 396-seat auditorium, exhibit hall, library, and museum store. In 1996, the museum opened the James F. Barr Conference Center. The new conference center prepares the museum for the 21st century. It is immensely adaptable for meetings and equipped with state-of-the-art electronics for video, multimedia, and computer presentations.
Our goal has been to create a space that would be a very attractive, pleasant place to be, at the same time that it serves a great variety of purposes.
In the years to come, the Museum of Our National Heritage will continue to live up to its founder's vision. It will continue to be the liveliest history museum in New England.
This museum is a general history museum that can literally wander all over the United States and can wander back and forth through time to find subjects, events, personalities that have made a difference in American history and hopefully help the American people understand a little more about themselves and about the past and where we've all come from. And by doing that, make us better prepared to address the present and the future.
Welcome back. Tom, if a person was to go to the museum tomorrow, what would he see? What exhibits do you have online now?
Well, in addition to the permanent exhibitions that we mentioned earlier about the Revolution and about the fraternal societies in America, you went up tomorrow, the first show you'd probably see would be one called Famine, which is a show that we opened in July, and which talks about the Great Famine in Ireland between 1847 and 1851. There's a large Irish-American community in the greater Boston area, as you know, and many of them are descendants of people who fled the famine during that period. So we thought on the 150th anniversary of that traumatic event that it would be appropriate for us to do an exhibition about it. And I would say, based on the response so far in terms of attendance and publicity, comments from visitors, that's turned out to be what will probably be our most popular show for the current calendar year. It's been a big hit, and people have been coming to not only see the show, but to attend the events that we've organized related to the show. We have a series of lectures. Last night, Tom O'Connor from Boston College talked about the Boston Irish based on his book, and 300 people showed up in the Maxwell Auditorium for that talk. And we had a couple Irish music concerts, and the auditorium again was filled to capacity. So that show looks like a sure winner. If you decided, having come up tomorrow to see that show and take in the permanent exhibition, that you wanted to go back a week later, you'll find that in just a week we'll be opening a quilt show based on the collection that Mr. and Mrs. James, just outside New York City, have collected over the years. So we'll be showing 30 of their antique quilts for the next couple months, and when that show comes down, they're going to loan us 30 more quilts from their collection to do a second show of quilts with a different theme. Quilt shows are something that we've done on a pretty regular basis because they're really one of the classic forms of American folk art, and they draw good crowds, and they draw quilters who will come from literally all over the United States to see a good quilt show.
I'll have to get my wife there. She loves the quilt.
Well, she'll enjoy it. I know she will.
Now, what are the directions to the museum? How do we get there?
Well, Lexington is pretty easy to get to. If you're coming from downtown Boston, you go out on the Alewife Parkway to Route 2A and take it into Lexington. If you're coming off Route 128, you get off at exit 30A and you follow Route 2A east about 2.5 miles. So that either way, if you're approaching Lexington from the east or from the west, you've almost got to come by the museum in order to get where you're going.
Okay, good. I've been there, but and it's quite a place. I'm going to have to go back again and take my wife.
And we're open, of course, 7 days a week. And I think one of the other things that people appreciate is the fact that, thanks to the continued support of the Scottish Rite members, we keep our doors open 7 days a week without having to charge any admission fee. And we have a large parking lot adjacent to the museum, so we offer free admission and we offer free parking.
You can't ask for anything better than that.
It's a bargain.
And the free exhibits, too.
Absolutely.
And some really nice ones. The exhibits are changing all the time.
I think one of the other things that people are curious about is exactly what it is that we collect, because when the museum was founded, unlike almost every other history museum in the history of the United States, there was no collection that drove the notion to start the museum. And so my predecessor, when he came on board, had to borrow exhibitions from other older collecting institutions in New England in order to get shows up and get the museum open, and then had to start collecting for the future. Fortunately, thanks to the fact that over the past 25 years, the museum has been able to start its own collection. We can now boast not only of a very respectable library and archives, but our collection of Masonic and other fraternal society memorabilia, swords, ceramics, aprons, just to mention three pretty obvious ones, is a very respectable collection today, and it's one that will continue to grow. And I think that it's safe to say that in terms of those kinds of objects, that while again the Grand Lodges have some of almost every kind you could think of, that in the end we're going to have the largest and richest collections of those things because it's very appropriate for this museum to have at its core collection those objects, including furniture and the decorative art on which the Masonic seal shows up the time and time and time again.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them. I know everywhere you look, most of the times you'll see the Masonic emblems.
Yes.
Yes. Say the museum is open 7 days a week at no charge.
My colleagues are, I suppose in a sense, my colleagues are jealous of me because we don't charge any admission fee, and particularly because when they look around to see the way in which the museum has developed its resources, they're flabbergasted by the generosity of the members of the Scottish Rite who undertook this project. Understand that it's one thing in 1971 to decide to spend $4 or $5 million to put up a new building. But then, having done that and having committed yourself to keeping the building open 360 days a year without charging any admission fee, imposes a huge burden on the Board of Trustees. Because that means that after they've paid the bills to get the building up and open, they've got to raise money continuously in order to keep it open and to pay a staff and to pay the heat and light bills. And they, through a series of sovereign grand commanders who recognized that responsibility, from George Newberry to Stanley Maxwell, to Frank Hall, and today to Bob Ralston, they've all supported the museum, and as a result, we have an endowment valued at somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million, and that's an endowment that's larger than most colleges in the United States. So we're really blessed to have their continued support.
It's excellent. Very noble undertaking. I see our time is almost up. Thank you, Mr. Leavitt, for being on our show tonight. And I hope to be able to do a live on-location shoot very soon up at the museum and show some of the exhibits that are out there.
We're looking forward to it. I think you'll find that our show on Initiating America is a real eye-opener, particularly for people who are not members of the fraternity. But it's also a show that we know from experience that members of the fraternity enjoy immensely.
Thank you very much for appearing on our show.
Thanks for having me.